Welcome back to kind of a new, I don't know. This is the Walk the Dog cast with Matt Mullins, but Matt Mullins is not here. Listen, he has a real life job, and sometimes that's going to interfere with our fake life job. So, wish Matt was here, but Mike is going to be our replacement for the day. This is Mike Marshall, professional yo-yo player. I don't have a list of items for you. SCR champion, 1A and 5A same year. Is that right? SCR.
Yep. South
Kansas,
Central.
Kansas State champion. You ever do anything good at Cal States or no?
I got third in 5A once at Cal. Nothing great at Cal
Okay.
States. I
I
placed
mean,
second in the state once, but it's not like, that was like sixth or something. So,
I was gonna say when you're winning other contests, a second and third place doesn't quite do it. Even
right.
Cal State
Yeah.
used to be really big.
Cal
Um,
State's used to be huge. Yeah.
So today we are going to focus up a little bit. Mike is a competitor. He's hopped back in the scene last year, diving deeper this year. Last year he competed a little bit, judged a little bit, so he's got extensive knowledge on a lot of the things that I've got no knowledge on. Um, Specifically, a little bit of 5A today I want to talk about, and the you'll see it when I post Mike's tricks. The 5A revival is what we're going for. Um, So I think the first step is, do you want to talk about the 5A glory days and see if we align on what we think that was?
The 5A glory days?
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely kind of open to interpretation because there's like Steve Brown era 5A, and then to me it's like Takeshi Matsura worldwide versus like Tyler Severance, Miguel Correa, and in the U.S. I personally think that I would consider that the glory days. I think Steve Brown was kind of the pioneer. There were more before him and during that time, but uh, for me, I think that when complex tricks and you start adding in body stuff and wraps and tanglers and angel wings or butterflies and things like that, more complex things with your hand and with your body. That's what I consider kind of the momentum builder or the glory days because it's taken off way from there, 10, 15 years later. So
Yeah, and so for me, I'm in the Severance Miggy category for the glory days of 5A. And it's not even just because of the trick quality,
mhm.
um, because that's always usually going to evolve, but it was really more the amount of participants and the heated competition is what drove it to where I say that is the 5A heyday.
Sure.
That competition, I think, and participant numbers.
I think that's fair also. You know, I think over the last several years, especially since COVID, it was definitely dying out, similar to a lot of the things that weren't 1A based, combining everything together because you have to make X division. But back then, you did have competitions where there were even preliminaries for 5A, so they take top 5 or top 10 because you had 15 people. Not every competition, but state contests, regional contests. It's very rare now, unless it's a national or world level contest, to have even a preliminary for anything for X division even. They go
Now,
straight to finals. So
when we had 5A prelims, do you
Mhm.
think that was partially due to the how do I say this? The tricks ver of like the decline probably started happening after Jake Elliott won, I think.
Mm,
Um, so the tricks at that point, I think, were almost unattainable for most people that were starting out versus when you had Severance and Miggy, you could almost understand the tricks a little bit better and think that you could get there. Does that make sense on your end as a competitor?
uh, kind of. I don't think that the complexity really caused the die off for 5A necessarily. I think that it was around that time. I would agree. Jake Elliott, not talking about national circuit, talking about when he won Worlds, he got third and then he won. I think that kind of after that, I wouldn't say it was causal. The trick sets and the advanced level that those tricks were. I don't think that caused it, but I do think it was around that time. I don't have necessarily a point that may have caused it, so I don't have like a counter argument to that idea. But I think that it's not. I don't think that it's in relation. like it's relational because the tricks today, which is several years later, given it is 8 years later,
I mean, it's a long
are
time. It
are
doesn't feel like
so much more complex than the Jake Elliott era. I mean, you can go online now. Not saying that Jake Elliott's tricks weren't complex. He could compete today. I have an argument to say that he could compete today and win nationals with the world's routine that he put out in I think it was 2016 is
it.
when he
Who's
won
going to argue
worlds.
that with you?
I think several people could argue that. I think that the U.S.
Who won?
does
Who
have some
won Nationals 5A last year?
John Wolf.
Okay, and John Wolf's routines. You on the judging side of things, if you took his Nationals routine, clicked it,
hmm
took Elliott's Worlds routine, clicked it, on today's standards, you think Elliott still wins?
From a clicker perspective, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
overall,
absolutely.
just actual score to who's going to win the contest.
So, yes, I think that a lot of things right now are kind of judge dependent,
Okay.
like judge by judge. There is an aspect of judging right now in competition that is fairly heavily reliant on performance-based tricks, choreography. It's not as heavy as it used to be, but during the Jake Elliott era, it was almost, I don't want to say non-existent. It was more existent in like 1A, but it was super click heavy. And things are still super click heavy, but there's an argument to be had if people who watch this or if you'd watched Axel Yo-Yo, the Axel Yo-Yo Cup. I think it was in Japan, maybe. It was somewhere in Asia's region, one of the regions in Asia. Jihu Lee, who is this year 2024's World Yo-Yo Champion, got second. And the person who got first, name is escaping me. I don't think it was Naoko Umae. I'll have to look.
Let,
But they
let me
clicked
reel you
much
back in.
lower.
Let me reel you back in from
Yep, sorry.
this tunnel that is going to be over the head for most of us. Um,
Sure.
so reeling you all the way back into the decline of 5A, and we're going to put it right at that timing. It's close to Elliott timing. We're not going to say it was
Yep,
because of tricks. Do you think it's Elliott retires and then so the decline happens more? We're talking US base because that's where most of the people watching this and um, I would say my little bit of knowledge is. So I
sure.
definitely don't want to go too deep into worldwide. Um, so Elliott retires, then you don't really have a lot of a talent pool coming up competing against each other to push each other and to get people excited for 5A. That could be part of it.
I,
Um,
I think that and pair that with the idea that, Elliot comes into the picture and Severance and Carrera are kind of out of the picture. Not out, but
yeah,
they
so
stopped
he kind of
competing
gets
around that area.
he
So
gets the torch, right?
he gets the torch and then he stops competing and now we don't have Severance,
He
Miggy,
didn't have
or
anybody
Jake
to pass
Elliott.
the torch to.
Right. And there were several 1A or there's several 5A players around that time that were very good.
Who
Like
do you want to say?
semifinals at
Like
Worlds good.
John or
I would go ahead and throw like John is up there, and then I'm not sure what year Jared Marcus came into the picture,
okay.
but he's actually currently one of my favorites.
Hmm.
Always a contender for the national title here in the U.S. Regional winner at a couple of contests, sponsored by Duncan. Those two guys, and then there were a few more names that no longer compete in 5A that I'm pretty sure were up there competing at the time. But yeah, I don't think that the torch was really passed from there. I think that since then, John Wolf has won 6 national titles, so that kind of gives you a picture on. And the other person who's won the other two is Jared Marcus.
Okay, so
So in the
you
last 8 years, there's been 2 national winners for 5A,
okay,
I
so you,
believe.
I got you. And it's interesting that it doesn't translate as well to the other players now that there just aren't the competitors. And that kind of started to happen a little before COVID, and then I think COVID probably finished the kill off. Because I think 5A is probably one of those things that grows more when you're going to more contests. Um, you're less likely to 5A around your house by yourself. When you go to a contest, I think you might push yourself just to enter a different category, right? You're going to do your 1A. Oh, maybe I'll try 5A this year. It's my third year competing. I'm going to try 5A. And if you're going to contests, to give you a reason to go to a contest because you're going to compete in multiple categories. I think that might be a little bit of it.
I,
You,
I do think that it is kind of 5A for the most part, if you're not a competitive 5A player initially, that it is kind of like a leisure activity or like, let me try this out, kind of like people who will throw 4A for a little bit just to like have some fun, have a break from 1A. I think that you're right that very few people have it as kind of their main division that they decide to compete in. I
Hmm.
do think it's also worth noting though that I can't think of a single instance that's notable, I would say, that someone just picked up 5A. I think that they're 1A players who transitioned to 5A. I think that that's also accurate.
Yeah, it's kind of like well, I was processing it as when you're going to a lot of contests, you're
Hmm.
going to 1A and you're like, all right, I can't make the top 10, but I'm also going to go into 5A because I have a chance over here to crack the podium possibly. So it puts more, I don't know, is there more players playing 5A because they know they're not going to crack the podium in 1A, but I'm going to go up on the stage again to play 5A?
I think there are players who do that, but I think the same can be said about like 4A. Um,
Yeah.
I think that there is a very, very competitive um, 1A turnout right now in the
Mhm.
US for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, we could touch on the fact, and it's not 5A related. We'll come back to 5A right after, but World's Finals this year had like 10 US competitors or something. It was ridiculous. Maybe it was 8. But to place at a contest in 1A is much more difficult than X Division for sure. So I do think that some people maybe go that route, but I think that the people who are placing, let's say nationally in 5A, do kind of main 5A.
Yeah.
John Wolf is the only, I think, competitor that I can name off the top of my head that I've seen, not podium, but in 1A finals at a regional contest that's also a 5A player. He got fifth at Virginia State, for example.
And maybe that's part of it too, because you don't get that brand recognition with a player because they're not doing 1A and 5A.
Sure.
Where Severance was really good at both. I don't re recall if Miggy was good at 1A or not, where you're competing at both and creating just you create yourself a following. And if you're good at
Hmm.
5A and 1A, it increases the number of people that are going to start following you. And then that creates more onto the 5A side, I feel like. Um, but I don't think there's a specific reason, and I don't like it's harder, right?
It's tough to put your finger on, and it is different, more difficult in a different way. Um, we can talk through why it would be considered harder. I think that you have to have kind of a background in 1A to be successful in 5A. I would say that. Um,
Mhm.
so that's what makes it a little bit more difficult. You don't have to be the best 1A player or play the meta in 1A to be good at 5A, but you do have to have your basic set of complex tricks and skills and ideas in order to throw more complex 5A tricks. It goes hand in hand, I think, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So last year you go into contests, X
Yep,
Division.
sure.
And you're mostly you started out judging, and then
Mhm.
I my side of it, you saw the competitions and you're like where you thought you didn't quite have it, and then you're seeing the competitions. You're like, all right, maybe I do. Is there also a little bit of not just the competitive aspect where now, all right, you know you can compete, so I want to compete instead of judge. Is there also a little bit of, hey, this is not the yo-yo contest I remember. Can I help rebuild what was a yo-yo contest?
Right. Yeah, there is a lot of that. I was considering not competing at all last year. You and
Mhm.
I had had a conversation at a point where I was like, "Hey, I think I just want to judge this year and kind of go do the circuit and do a regional contest or two, a state contest or two, and see if I'm like if they need help with nationals or something," which I didn't end up doing. I will put that out there.
Mhm.
But I decided to compete at UIYC because it was also Kansas State, and I wanted to have like a state title. Not to say that it was easy. There were plenty of Kansas competitors
Mhm.
that were good. Um, but uh, for me, I kind of have this perception of 1A right now that we've had the conversation of also in our in club in the G2 Yo-Yo Club
Mhm.
um, that there is a certain stack of like meta tricks and That it's actually in a pretty good place right now because the best person who hits all of these tricks the cleanest and then the most complex tricks, highest clicks to choreography wins the competition. Best person wins the competition, basically.
Mhm.
Um, so I it didn't really used to be that way. Like you're saying, it's kind of evolved to that. And I wasn't a huge fan of that, so I thought maybe I'll just go judge. That was the reason why I decided maybe I just go judge.
And I think I do want to put out there, so you don't necessarily like that, um, where I'm not a huge fan of watching people compete because of that as well. Um, but on my side, looking at it, I kind of think that it makes sense for competitors.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
because there's better groundwork for how can I win this contest. It's a little more consistent judging across the board. If you know that these are the tricks that are going to click the highest. If I can do the fastest and the cleanest, there's a good chance that I'm going to win this contest. Uh,
right.
and you might not have years ago, you didn't have that. You didn't know exactly, hey, how much is, whatever, Mike Mark
This, and that
Tiger
worth,
3
and
going to
yeah,
score
right.
today?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot more calculated now, which is a good thing in a lot of aspects. I think
I
that
see both alleys,
right.
where,
Yeah, I
you know,
I I, I do like
style
the
needs to
more
be in there as well, right? So
right.
it is a freestyle.
Yes.
So
But with that's kind of the thing that I love about 5A. There is a set list kind of tricks that not necessarily are meta, but that there are concepts that like every successful routine seems to have in them for the most part. But 5A in a way is way less limited than 1A because it's not attached to your finger, but also the base set of tricks just evolves. What plane to do it in, what body part to use. So like, there are certain tricks, and I can list off a few right now. There's going to be propellers, helicopters, angel wings or butterfly, tangler,
mhm.
things like that that you can learn, and then there's 10 different ways to do it instead of one or two or three. There's just a bunch of variations. So that's what I really liked about it going into it. And I competed in 5A in the past. I won SCR, so I'm regional champ for 5A. I got fourth at one of the nationals, I think 2015 or 16, I think, fourth or fifth, I can't remember. Um, but
Wasn't third,
coming,
so it's not the
huh?
top three. If it's
Nope,
not
not
the top
podium.
three,
Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's something that I really do enjoy about it is it doesn't feel like I have to do this, and that.
hmm
Um, and I think that that is a big draw for not a lot of people who go into 5A, but it doesn't feel as like heavy as like I need to hit, a 2.0 hook. I need to go above my head for this. I need to do neck stole. I need to do that to even like have a shot. Because if I just throw this really complex tech or this really original like Slack stuff, it's gonna click well, but like
hmm
it won't be near anyone else's stuff.
yeah, yeah.
So.
Um, and then I don't know how much. So when we last year, you're going to judge, and then you're also wanting a little more from this yo-yo journey. So people put a lot of time and effort into yo-yo. Um, and then we kind of talked about Mike's legacy, and I kind of tried to translate it away for him to think, um, to position his or put forth his effort in a certain way that he wants to be remembered, kind of in the yo-yo world, because you can quickly just be forgotten, right?
Oh yeah, I think that that's
Um,
totally fair.
and he's put half your life into yo-yo.
Also fair. I took a longer break than a lot of people, but
Well, a lot of
um,
people just wouldn't come back from that break, right?
also that's very true. I
That's
will
the
I will say that.
normal that is the normal life, I would say, of majority of competitive yo-yo players. 10 to you want to say 18,
Yeah.
you are 10 to 12, you're learning, then you start to get the competitive bug and you are all in competitions, I think, until college or even through college. But once you start to get a real job, a family, things just change and yo-yo it is you have to be a top 1% of the top 1% to be able to make a living somehow in yo-yo. Especially if you're on the competitive side of things and don't go into and you didn't brand yourself to be able to sell yo-yos. Um, it's very, very hard to sell enough yo-yos for a company to make a living off of it, like the
Sure.
remodel or whoever else. You know what I mean?
Yep. I think that that's all of those are totally fair points, and I do think that that's kind of a norm for sure. Very few people. I think even I mean we throw big name in there. We throw Gentry in there. I think that he hasn't competed in I don't know exactly maybe 4 years, 5 years. Early 20s. He's a year or two older than me. I think that Takeshi's stopped competing. We talked about Tyler and Miggy for 5A as well.
And
Stopped competing at a point.
Tyler's more of the example.
He's
It's like
sure.
if you want to make a living from it, you're a great competitor. If you build a brand behind you, you end up making a yo-yo. So
Yeah.
Gentry was able to do that through Yo-Yo Factory with the shutter. Um, Tyler kind of had it with Yo-Yo Factory, branched out, made his own thing. Most
Mhm.
high-profile players that get into adulthood and want to run a business branch off and make their own brand.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of the way they stick into it. But then it becomes a job, and you don't see them, I guess, yo-yoing. Um, and that's kind of where the legacy path, right? So Gentry, he's almost at the point that people will forget how good he was, right?
It's funny that you kind of mention it. Um,
Because he's DNAer. He's not two-time world champion. Is he a two-time
yeah,
world champion?
I
Did he
think
win world champion? Did he?
he won nationals several times. Uh, so I have two step brother-in-laws. I have two brother-in-laws,
Mhm.
and they're both learning to yo-yo. One of them's 10, one of them's 12. They knew who Gentry is.
Mhm.
They want to meet Gentry. They want to talk to Gentry. I used to hang out with Gentry when I grew up. We lived in Chico together. We trained together. I said, well, maybe I can send him a message on Instagram or something, and maybe he responds, maybe he doesn't. But they know him as like the DNA king,
Yes.
and they don't know if he's won a contest. And to me, I'm like, that's crazy. Like
Yeah.
Gentry, to me, in my mind, growing up with him and seeing him win like, everything, I was like, Gentry's one of the best yo-yoers in the world. And to them, they're like,
Mhm.
yeah, he's so good at the DNA. I'm like, he's really good at the DNA. You're right. Yes. So, the newer generation, I think he will always be popular, but uh, to me, his legacy will be how good he was in changing the game, also bringing in the performance aspect of it. But to the newer generation, it really is kind of like, is his legacy the shutter? Is it the DNA? Is he the TikTok yo-yo guy? Um, all respect to Gentry. Love Gentry. Haven't talked to him in a few years now, but it is an interesting point. The idea of what is your legacy and what will people remember you for, because per, per, perception is kind of crazy. Like, what do you think
Mhm.
when you think of Gentry? Like, what is his legacy to you?
Well,
Because it's
so
probably different than mine.
yeah, I mean, so Gentry to me was Little Jensen.
Okay,
Um, you know what I mean?
sure.
And that's where, and it changed. Then he now is just it's a polished performer. Um, and I kind of see him as a updated version of a yo-yo salesman. And it's not going to do school shows. He does it
Mhm.
on the internet, right?
Yep,
So
and
most
has done it live TV and stuff. Yeah, I
it's
gotcha. Right.
entertainment across his socials that also directs to the call to action of buying a shutter or whatever yo-yo. And keeping that, you have to keep the entertainment aspect for that to work. So to me, I think, probably better at his current, but that's really hard because he was really good when you go to think back
Right.
at it, but he's very good, very, very good at what he's doing right now. But he also was world champion, so he was very good at what he was doing every step of the way. He's been great. You know
I,
what I
I
mean?
wonder if we were to ask Gentry what and you don't want to come out and just ask someone like face to face, like, do you think you're a better yo-yoer or like yo-yo salesman or like a yo-yo entertainer? Like, do you think you could win a yo-yo contest or do you think that you would be more successful doing like this?
Well, I
Because,
think in it's hard to actually think about it too because for him, but he was the best.
oh yeah,
He won world yo-yo contests. He was the
yep,
best competitive player.
absolutely.
And it just could he have stayed the best year? At some point, it's kind of you lose that drive, right? You're Michael Jordan,
Yeah,
go play baseball, whatever it is. Um, Could he come back and compete? Who knows? But I just think he's been very good at all those aspects. Um, and I think when you have that type of like background, like your legacy, hopefully you incorporates all of that.
Sure.
And at some point, he's able to remind those kids, I don't just DNA. This is where I started, right?
Yeah.
Long
I
hair, one drop shirt.
We're talking PNWR
Yeah,
2012
yeah.
Gentry. Love that. Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, so, I mean, I'll take credit for it. There's got to be a Gentry doc that comes out soon on his YouTube page, just to recap where he's at the last 15 years. Because think about it, he's been a top tier yo-yo for the last 15
Oh yeah.
and 10 specifically, like probably the number one name in yo-yo.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Absolutely.
15 would be 2010. So maybe you're coming off the Jensen.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
That's about when I started.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, but I think the idea pulling back to like the legacy thing is still like a weird one for me in
Mhm.
particular because I didn't have, in my opinion, I did not have a huge impact competition wise or in the community when I was doing the competition circuit like when I was younger. I knew a lot of people, and I think that one thing I was good with was like I was personable. I was decently likable. I wasn't everyone's cup of tea, but I was always like kind of happy and willing to hang out with people and learn tricks, teach tricks.
Mhm.
Go with people, go grab food at contests. Hang out with them before and after parties and stuff. So, it is when you were asking me, it was like, well, where if I'm coming back into this, which is
Mhm.
difficult with work and a family and stuff, kind of like where can we define a legacy, like for
Mhm.
me? Um, so still working through with that, but one thing that I really think could potentially help, um, is I do plan on coming out with a tutorial series for 5A tricks from beginner to advanced, including tricks from national level and world level competitors. So starting out with the basics, Miggy has a really good, 5 step uh, or 5 tier tutorial series. They're several years old, but that's kind of how I started, was learning with him and Jake Elliott. And then I learned from a couple other 5A tutorial series, and there's just a lot kind of missing in terms of like how to make it competitive. And uh, you can learn a lot of the basics and you can learn a lot of older competitive stuff.
Mhm.
But I think it would be really important if there is going to be. I keep hashtagging like 2025A, and you do like the 5A revival.
Mhm.
Um, that there would be something out there for someone who wants to get into 5A to say, um, I want to get into this, but this isn't enough. How do I learn this, this, and this? How can I incorporate this, this, and this? And there's just not a tutorial out there. And just like being helpful in that regard to kind of bring 5A back.
Now,
So.
I mean, tutorial is one aspect of it, and it won't cover the basis for reviving 5A.
No, not all the
Um,
way, no.
Now, a top level competitor, do you wish there was tutorials out there for the high end tricks you're trying to learn, or
Absolutely.
you do wish that? So you don't just get to the
1000%.
point that you're downloading the video and going slow and teaching yourself in a different way than what a
That
tutorial would be able to do.
that's what I have to do, and it's
Right.
very difficult to someone who doesn't have the eye to do it.
But
There
once
is
you get to that skill level, don't you have the eye most likely to pick up tricks and what's happening a little bit? Where the basics, you do need the step by step. Um, like I
so
don't know how competitive can you get with a tutorial? Like how, you know what I mean?
there is something that I do want to relate back to, what I've kind of learned coming into my most recent job field in the last like 4 years. There is a place where I don't think people should live called tutorial hell. And that's just learning what you see in tutorials and then doing those tricks and contests. Because you do kind of have to put your own spin on it. You do have to combine tricks into, combos and
Yep.
whatnot. But I'll give you one example. So there is a person on YouTube whose name is Keisuke O, and he puts out tutorials for or small combos from professional yo-yoers. Um, and they are helpful in different aspects of he puts out some from like Migi Hosen and also Takeshi Matsura. Um, I think Cock On also. But there are aspects to that where you can learn that and then like how do I incorporate this? And I think that it would be important, and I would be remiss to say um, there isn't information out there on how to make your or how to put things together. You know, I think learning the tutorials and making tutorials is good. And maybe saying tutorials from my perspective wasn't the right word. Um, but I don't know if what word would you use to help make routines, to help make combos, to help kind of unlock uh, how you think about the tricks that you know and put them together to be like
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah, and
So
yeah, I think you can probably it's almost like a lesson.
yeah,
It's gonna be a trick building lesson, but you would probably want to have tutorials out there for, two or three tricks,
right.
and then talk about how you should be able to combine these into a better competitive trick where it's not a set trick, but this is how you transfer from one to the other, how you shorten one, how you speed up one, or whatever that concept is to make it better for the stage.
Right. And I think that one thing that I kind of want to keep in mind, and it doesn't necessarily depend on this, like it's not dependent,
Hmm.
but I would like to have several placements in X Division and win 5A if it's an individual division at several contests this year, if possible, to be able to kind of showcase that like this is possible and showcase that this is legitimate and that it's kind of a way that people can get into it. Because I'm not starting from fresh right now. Obviously, I've been doing 5A for a while, but I took that like long break. But that someone can get into 5A by watching these videos and getting help with it,
Hmm.
so they can watch a basic tutorial. And like we said, you without staying in tutorial hell, like how can I think about this? To like go into a contest 6 months from now and like compete in this because I want to compete in 5A. Like this is cool.
Hmm.
I love doing this. It's what I do in my leisure time right now. I'm not placing in 1A. And I want to have some fun on stage and like this
Yeah.
is this is how. So like how do I do it? And like that's what I kind of want to help with. Because
Yeah.
I've been having I've been throwing 1A for a long time, but I've been having a lot of fun with 5A lately. It's something that I feel like I can be, even though I'm doing there are like if you watch some of the videos that you post or that I post, there you can see the base set of tricks. I have tanglers and butterflies and things like that, 360s and aerials, but it's like how I put them together and enjoy it that also like clicks well, and like showing that choreographed and like getting on stage and doing that. Like I'm just really looking forward to that. So.
So Mike's goals right now, dominate 5A at the competitions he goes to, expand 5A players, and I think that that comes in twofold, getting people to compete in it that are already throwing a little bit of 5A, and then also how do I get somebody to start 5A,
Mhm.
right? So those are kind of the like I would say your three action items right now for this uh stage two of your yo-yo career for your legacy building.
I think that that's fair. I appreciate those action items. I need to put those in bullets up above my desk,
Hmm. Like
keep those
how, like if
reminders
you could
there.
get G2 Jake to throw 5A, you're completing one of those action items,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
people and it just builds. So then those are the kind of the steps. Try 5A and then to compete at 5A.
And you know what's funny
The
about
solo,
that?
the third one's yourself. You're just going to
You're
compete.
right.
And that one's the easiest one, right? Because you have the competitive drive.
That one's the easy one, but competing and winning, putting those
Competing
together,
is easier.
like
The winning
yeah,
aspect is harder, but
yeah,
you just to compete at your highest level, that is there.
yeah. And you know what's funny, Jake, is I know that you don't really throw 5A. I know you maybe don't throw 5A at all, but I can almost guarantee you, let's say I can guarantee you, the first time you hit something like angel wings or a tangler like correctly,
Hmm.
like it's gonna like obviously there's going to be frustration the same way there
There's
is with 1A, but like the first time you see how different it is, like having two different aspects, not just the your like the yo-yos on your finger and the yo-yos on the string. Like no, you have a counterweight, you have the yo-yo, and like two of them are moving like in tandem in like a really cool way. You almost get kind of like hooked. I can almost guarantee you if we taught you some 5A that you would have a
so
really good time.
for me, there's a little bit of old dog's new trick. It's hard to teach that opposite hand to do anything.
That's
Um,
fair.
and both times I've done 5A,
Hmm.
I lose. Tricks are gone. I learn it and it's gone. But I've gone through bee sting both times, and that's where I stopped. Bee sting feels really nice, but that's where I have stopped both times.
I I will say when I was competing in 5A back in like 2014 through 2016, um, I did not know how to do aerial bee sting, double bee sting, reverse bee stings, things like that. I knew how to do bee sting, but now that I've taught myself in the last several months, like going back and trying to make my trick set like very competitive again, um, learned how to do like the more complex versions of it. It just like it every time I learn something and hit it, it's like, oh my gosh, like now I need to learn this and this.
Yeah,
Now
you
I
get
need to
that
put this in
dope.
combo. Like this is perfect.
Yeah, that's there's a and it's a better dope hit because the progress to actually get all the way to learn that trick and then hit the trick,
Mhm.
it's a little different.
Yeah, for sure. And throwing 1A for as long as you've been throwing 1A a long time too, right? Not
But
necessarily in a competitive sense, but when you hit a new trick, it feels good, right? And maybe you put it into your trick set. Hopefully you remember it. But like when you hit something that you love to hit and like it's a trick that like, oh,
mhm.
like this is my new like go-to when I'm like testing yo-yos. Like I just like hit this trick and this will be
Yeah.
awesome. Um, like for me, hitting new things in 5A, it's almost like that for like every trick now. With 1A, I have very little that like learning a new trick. I'm like, oh, okay, like sweet.
Okay.
I got it. All right. Like, and then I throw a 5A trick and learn it. I'm like, oh, like that's it. All right,
Huh?
cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're ending on that, Mike. Thanks for stopping in
Oh
the
yeah,
podcast, filling in for Matt for me this week. Um,
absolutely.
we'll have you on again, hopefully with Matt as well.
Sweet. Love
Anything
Matt.
last? Any last word?
Throw 5A.
Throw
See you
five
guys
in.
in see you guys soon. 2025A, 5A revival.
See ya.
See ya.